I suppose the first thing, John, to ask is why any respectable scholar in mathematics at St John's, Cambridge, ever went into anthropology.
Well, it's quite a good question, but it's not very difficult to answer. When I was interviewed to come up to John's, I explained that I really wasn't interested in mathematics. I wanted to read economics. And my college, in its wisdom, said that since they'd given me a scholarship in mathematics, that if I wanted to do economics, I should do part 2 of the maths tripos first, and then in my 3rd year I could read part 2 of the economics tripos. And that to do that I would have to do the work for part 1 of the economics tripos in my spare time during my first 2 years. So I embarked on this course, and it didn't take me very long to discover that economics was the dullest subject imaginable. So that at the end of my 2nd year, having failed to become a wrangler in part 2, it was quite clear that I shouldn't persist and read part 3 of the maths tripos, and that I ought to switch to something or other. So I merely read through the handbook and tried to arrange the triposes that were available to me in some order of preference, bearing in mind that I was sure of a degree anyway, and if I failed, nothing would happen. So I dithered for a long time between moral sciences, which contained psychology and philosophy and metaphysics and other interesting subjects, and the arc and nth tripos. And according to the handbook, the arc and nth tripos would enable me to answer questions like the origin of civilization, what's the meaning of culture, so on. And I thought, God, I'd like to know the answers to those questions. So I switched to arc and nth, but I still haven't found the answers to the questions.
You didn't get any advice from anybody in St John's. I mean, there wasn't any weren't any anthropologists there, I take it.
Well, there were no anthropologists, but Glyn Daniel was Director of Studies in arc and nth, and he was my supervisor, of course, when I switched.
And you switched in 38?
38, yes, yes.
And so you did the arc and nth tripos in the year before the war?
Yep.
And finished in 39?
That's right.
And it was Glyn that was supervised you right the way through, was it?
Well, he was my Director of Studies, but I was supervised by Dryberg and Trevor as well.
Trevor in physical anthropology, eh?
Well, no, not only in physical anthropology, but also in what was called general anthropology.
Of course, yes. He was a pupil of Herstovitz.
Yeah,
He knew about most of these different fields. Jack Dryberg, what was he like as a supervisor?
Well, he was very inspiring. I didn't think he knew very much, but he was full of enthusiasm and encouraged one to think for oneself. And I enjoyed working with him very much.
He was inspiring in what way? You mean he believed in anthropology?
Well, yes, he enjoyed life, yes.
Yes.
And he was a very colourful figure. There were all sorts of legends about him which one could fully believe in, about his adventures in the Sudan and in Kenya. And I admired him as a man. I remember being very impressed once by... He suffered from some kind of toe rot, for which there was the only available cure was in East Africa. And he was being treated, however, rather effectually by an ordinary orthodox GP. And the GP called on him one morning when I was actually in his rooms in Brookside. And the GP came in and walked over to the sideboard where there was a decanter with whiskey in it, poured himself a glass and drank it down, and without speaking any word to my supervisor, said, "Right, same time again tomorrow," and left. And I thought, anybody who can be treated in this way must be surely a man of worth listening to.
But he was a great friend of Evans Pritchard.
Yes,
Dryberg.
yes, that's right.
And did any of this come out in his teaching at all? You say he didn't know.
No, I don't think he understood a word of what the EP was up to, no. But, I mean, his friendship with the EP was showed itself in his consideration for his students. That's to say that he took, I think, 3 or 4 of us who he thought were bright, presumably, over to Oxford to visit EP and RB and Gluckman as well in the Easter term of 1939, I suppose, and explained that EP was the external examiner in the Tripos, and that he thought it would be helpful for EP to get to know us beforehand. So it was.
And who were the other students with you at the time? Anyone who went into anthropology professionally?
No, I don't think so. Paul Howell was a year ahead of me.
Paul Howell was finished in
37, was it? Or 38?
No, 38.
38.
Yeah.
I think he was just 1 year ahead. No, I've forgotten the names of the other people. I don't think they... well, Philip Baldwin. Do you remember Philip Baldwin?
Oh, yes.
Who became Air Commodore or something or other.
Yes.
I mean, he didn't go into anthropology.
No,
but,
he went into
the Air Force.
Air Force, and he was in charge of the cadet squadron here.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you met Max Gluckman over there
yes.
at that time,
I thought he was Zuckerman when he was introduced to me, but I was never very good at remembering names. But I found out afterwards that he was Gluckman.
And Meyer Fortes, was he there then too?
Yes, that's when I first met him. Well, I'd met Meyer earlier in Cambridge because he'd come over to read a paper to the Anthropological Society. So I remember meeting him then. And I remember my first exchange with him. He asked me what I wanted to do when I graduated. So I said, well, I want to become an anthropologist. So he said, oh, really? Have you got a private income? So I said, no. So he said, well, you better give up the idea then, didn't you? That was that.
And you met Radcliffe Brown too over in
That's
Oxford.
right, yes.
And what was your impression of him at that time?
Well, he gave me the impression of a sort of repertory actor waiting between trips. I mean, he was I don't know if you've ever met him, but I mean, he had this air about him of playing a part all the time. He was a very odd creature in a way, and I think that one can understand why it was in a way that his period in Sydney was the sort of height of his career, in as much as there he could play a part on a small provincial stage much more effectively than he could in either Oxford or Cambridge.
Or Chicago?
I don't know what happened in Chicago. Perhaps there's no stage to play on there at all.
But I mean, that must have been a particularly interesting time at Oxford, because Radcliffe Brown went there in 37.
37, that's right.
And Meyer and EP must have gone there just after that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some very interesting correspondence which I have for you in my room.
Good.
About that period, and about Meyer and about the plans of Evans Pritchard and Meyer Fortes to set up, with Gluckman I think, to set up a the Department of Anthropology in England.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Which in a sense I suppose they did. I mean, to supersede presumably Malinowski's
Oh, I
department,
see.
whom they
Yes.
didn't get on with.
No, right.
And Jack Dryberg, in this early correspondence, of course, had always been the great helper of EP in his struggles against Malinowski. I mean, that's,
yes.
I imagine, intellectually. You spoke earlier on about
Well,
that
yes.
intellectual.
Well, I think, I mean, he may have provided sort of moral and convivial support, but I don't think intellectually he really had all that much to offer, and I don't think that, in a way, he would have been of any... he wouldn't have been any powerful ammunition, as it were, in an intellectual battle with Malinowski.
No. I think it was probably in their manipulations of
Yes.
one thing and another that led them to this. But there was an interesting passage in Tom Dryberg's autobiography, Ruling Passions, which I was looking at the other day, in which he quotes a comment I think it was from an obituary that Jack Dryper and E.P. wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And E.P. really had quite a high idea of Dryberg, and talks about him keeping Cambridge anthropology alive at that particular time.
Oh, I see. Well, that wasn't difficult to do, because otherwise it would have been very dead without him. But I mean,
Well,
I think that's quite right. He did that, yes.
I mean, the professor at that time, you didn't mention anything about the professor.
Hutton.
Yes.
Well, I didn't mention it, no.
Because he obviously
But
did the civil
I mean,
rights
he did teach me. He taught me material culture.
Yes. That was all.
Well, I think he probably gave some more lectures on, I don't know, on caste or something. But when I had to choose one special area, if the Drypers could be taken in 1 year or in 2.
Yes.
If you took it only in 1 year, then you need to take only one special area. So I took East Africa rather than India. Hutton taught the Indian stuff, but he also taught physical anthropology, material culture.
Yes.
And his method of teaching was to stand at the end of the room, and we were all sitting round facing at tables, and he would hold up a bow or something like that and describe it, and then hand it to the student who was sitting nearest to him, and the student would fondle it, of course, and hand it on to the next student, and so on. By this time, Hutton would have started on the next bow. So if one was sitting, as it were, opposite the lecturer, there was a phase difference of about half a dozen or so bows between what one was listening to and what one was handling. This made it impossible to understand anything at all.
Did you get taught the, was it 8 or 9 different forms of bow release?
That's the sort of thing, yes, that kind of...
He was still doing that after the war when I was...
yes.
It nearly put me off both materialism and culture for a lifetime.
Sure, yes.
Terrifying it was. And curiously, he never lectured on... I mean, I never heard him lecture on caste and things which he knew something about.
Yes.
It was about material culture. And usually I found taken from the Horniman Museum handbook.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And if you had these books under the desk, you could flick them over and find the right page.
I see.
Precisely the
you
same.
must have put more effort into it than I did.
Yes, I do. I was just trying to keep track of the different forms of bow release that were going on at that time. But then there was Hutton.
Then there was Burkitt, Miles Burkitt.
Miles Burkitt, yes. That was another man who, as I recall, lectured...
Squire of Grantchester, yes.
Squire of Grantchester, lectured from a book. I don't know whether it's been published in your day, but in mine again, it's one of these books, so many Cambridge academic writes, with 8 chapters in.
Oh,
one for each lecture, during
yes.
term time, and you just sort of flick them over like that and ran your eye.
That's right, yes.
Through them.
Yes.
He was the archaeologist.
That's right, yes.
But there must be Glyn Daniel.
Glyn Daniel certainly wasn't a lecturer. Graham Clark, I think, wasn't a lecturer either. He certainly lectured on pollen analysis.
He was a research fellow.
Yes. Yep. But there was Trevor.
Yes.
That was probably about all, I think.
It's, without wishing to be uncharitable to any of those people, it's difficult to see how one would make a career, how one would decide on a career, having been taught in the rather haphazard way that went on at that time.
Well, I didn't think that I could, that I would complete my professional training in Cambridge, and indeed I was all set to go to Harvard in 1939 had the war not come, or rather had conscription not come. Trevor was very helpful, Jack Trevor, in getting me these connections, and at one time it was suggested that I should go to Northwestern University with her to work with Herskowitz, but then I forget why I was shunted to Harvard instead, and I was made a fellow of the Peabody Museum, in fact, but I never took it up because of the war.
And you said you had already got interested in East Africa, and the fact that you were going to Herskovits meant that you were already interested in Africa.
Well, I had to make a choice
Yes.
between East Africa and India,
Yes.
and Hutton, it was a choice between Hutton and Dryburgh
Yes.
was obviously the better person. I think
Yes.
Ben Daniel probably advised me on that point.
And you had had some contacts or relationships with East Africa before that?
Not at all. I'd hardly been anywhere north of Birmingham.
Well, I didn't mean you personally. I really meant, yes, I really meant your relatives.
No, not at all.
No settler,
None whatsoever. Absolutely none, no.
no. So it was...
Just foreign parts as far as I was concerned.
Yes. And there was nothing in the family background, like so many anthropologists, that you scratch them and there's a tea planter underneath.
No, not at all. I had one uncle at the time who was in Australia, but that was all. All the others had... well, I think that there were a number of relatives who had gone to Australia, because my paternal grandfather, in fact, was the youngest of 13, and I once inquired where the other 12 were. None of them seemed to be around, as it were, and were told that they'd all been advised by the police that if they left, then no further proceedings would be taken against them. So that's... two were alleged to have been last seen working in a quarry somewhere in New South Wales. So that was my 2 generations up.
That was your grandfather's
That was my
siblings.
grandfather's generations, yes.
And where did they come from? I mean, where was it this...
From the village of Corsham in Wiltshire. My grandfather was a stonemason, worked in a quarry, and then became a foreman, and then ran a news agency, I think.
A newspaper?
Newspaper,
Yes.
yes.
And your father was in...
My father was began life as a piano tuner, and then acquired a business. Well, we went into partnership with a man, and they sold pianos in Reading.
Yes. So you were brought up in Reading?
Yes. Well, I went away to school, but I was born there. Yes.
Yes. When you were in, when your nascent career in anthropology was interrupted by the war, you went into the Navy.
Yes.
Was there any experiences there which confirmed you or disconfirmed you in your intention to go on with anthropology afterwards? You spent some time in Cape Town, didn't you?
No, not during the
Simonstown.
war. No. Oh no, I was in the Pacific. Well, I was in the Arctic and the Pacific and the Atlantic and various other places, and I was in the United States Navy. No, I think that I was confirmed in my feeling that it would be nice to have a job where I could do research, be my own master, and that sort of thing.
And travel abroad.
And travel abroad, yes.
And then you got, but you didn't really spend any time ashore in any foreign parts.
Oh yes.
I mean, apart from
well, in New
America.
Caledonia, I was in.
You were?
Yes. We were based. The ship was based in Noumea, and we were based at Tontuta.
Yes. And when you came back to England, when you were demobilized, did you? I mean, how did you get into anthropology? How did you make?
Well,
the transition
I
then?
didn't. I came back in at the end of 1943. Then I was in Farnborough. I was senior naval officer in Farnborough at the Royal Aircraft Establishment for a year, and then I was in the Admiralty for a year. So I was already in England at the end of the war.
Yes. And then how did you make the transition into anthropology?
Oh, well, I was anxious to get out of the Navy as fast as possible. So there was a scheme whereby one could get accelerated demobilization if you could show that you had a useful job to go to.
Yes.
So I thought that if I could dream up some research project that had to be done at once, if it was to be done at all,
Yes.
then this would be a powerful argument for getting out of the Navy. So I had met, perhaps I should explain that in 1939 I had gone to Lapland on a so-called field trip with a grant of £15 from my college, Johnson John's.
Who were very interested in the Arctic at that time.
Well, it was Lindgren who really suggested that I should go to Weißler-Ochter.
Yes, and she, of course, was attached in a vague way to the department. Well, she gave some
Well,
lectures.
she gave... I don't know that she actually gave lectures at that stage. That was after the war.
Yes.
But she was certainly around, and it was she who suggested that I should go to Lapland.
Yes.
And I suppose it was perhaps through her that I met Firth when he was secretary of the Colonial Social Science Research Council, which was set up in 1944.
Yes.
I'd gone to there was some sort of anniversary meeting of the RAI in about 1944 when Firth read a paper about microsociology. It was a rather grand occasion because Jan Smuts was there, I seem to remember. And through meeting Firth, I then discussed with him the possibility of going to the Gilbert Islands in the Pacific.
Yes.
In order to study the effect of the Japanese occupation on the islands.
I see. So
this being the only part of the British Empire that had been occupied by the Japanese but had already been liberated.
Yes.
And my argument was that the Americans had moved into the Gilberts, having driven out the Japanese, and that the effects of the Japanese occupation would soon be submerged under the effects of the American occupation.
Yeah.
And therefore I must be sent there forthwith to study this. Then somebody drew my attention to an advertisement on the back of the New Statesman for a job with the Rhodes Livingston Institute.
Yes.
And although I had no particular desire to go to the middle of Africa, I think I, at that stage, would have preferred to go to the Gilbert and Ellice. I thought that it was prudent to apply, and indeed I thought that if I was offered a job by the Rhodes Livingston, then this might be a way of putting pressure on Firth to hurry up with his grant to go to the Gilbert and Ellice. So I applied to the Rhodes Livingston and was offered the job, and spoke to Firth about this, who said, "Oh no, there are going to be long delays before we can come to any decision about this." And I was still keen to leave the Navy as fast as possible, and so I decided to take the Rhodes Livingston appointment.
And you went straight down to join them.
Yes, I went on a troop ship from Liverpool, and I went to Durban, and then caught a train and went up to Northern Rhodesia. And
at that time, who else was there? Max Gluckman was...
Well, Max Gluckman was, of course, director. And
but he had been back in Oxford in 1938 when you were there. But that was...
1939 when I went to visit him in Oxford, yes. And then he went there just before the war started, I think.
Oh, yes, when he took over from...
well, he was assistant to Godfrey Wilson, and then Godfrey Wilson joined the South African army, and Max became acting director and eventually was made director.
Yes. So he was installed there by the time you got there?
Well, he was not only installed, he was already in the field with the team that he was recruiting at the end of the war. So Mitchell and Marwick and Marwick's wife, Joan Marwick, they were already working among the Lamba, just south of the Copperbelt, when I arrived. I arrived late, as it were, and they had been there, I think, for about 2 or 3 weeks before I got there. But I was in the Lamba for 5 days, one of which was a Sunday. Another day was very wet, so we couldn't do any work. So on the basis of that, we wrote a monograph. That's one of my first publications.
And that's when but you must have spent a little time, because I remember that. I mean, you've got a certain amount of survey material in it.
That's right, yes.
And so you must have got off the ground fairly rapidly with that.
Well, they had already been there. It was just,
they had done the survey.
Yes, they had collected most of the data.
So who was it that sort of set up the kind of survey methodology, as it were, that I suppose, became a feature of Rhodes Livingston work?
Well, I suppose it was thrashed out in Cape Town. When we completed the Lamba survey, we then were sent to the Tonga, Plateau Tonga, which was later studied by Elizabeth Colson, with the idea that we would carry out another survey there, and we were to camp in the field and so on, as we had done among the Lamba. But I was given the job of putting the camping gear on the train, and being unaccustomed to Central African trains, I put it on a goods train, not knowing it would then take weeks to arrive at its destination. So we never did a survey of the Tonga. So we then went on to Cape Town and worked with Shapira for a while. The theory was that, Gluckman's theory was that Mitchell and I had spent the war learning only how to waste time, and that we needed some kind of academic rehabilitation before we could really start serious research work. So we spent, I suppose, 4 or 5 months in the University of Cape Town working with Shapira and writing essays and that sort of thing.
But the working out this kind of survey material,
Yes.
you say that, working out the survey research, I mean, that was really done by Mitchell and Gluckman before you arrived, was
Well,
it? To some extent?
I think that it became formalized in Cape Town because Mitchell and I had the job of...
After that, yes.
Yes, Mitchell and I had the job of, as it were, making sense of the data that had been
Yes,
collected, and
yes.
I think that both of us felt that we should be much more systematic than Gluckman had ever been.
Was Clyde's background...
Well, he'd done a survey in a hospital in Durban. I mean, he had a degree in sociology,
Yes,
so he had some idea of what it was all about.
yes. And you had this mathematical background too, so you thought that
Yes,
things
that's
might be
right.
slightly more precise than...
That's right, yes,
yeah.
yes.
And that, in a sense, led both of you on.
Well, that's right, but I think we were also guided by Shapira. I seem to remember, I mean, one of the more valuable things to come out of this period in Cape Town was really a filing system, which Shapira had worked out over the 20 years or so that he'd been working in Bechuanaland. And one can see in the filing scheme that he gave us really some of the chapters of his books on Botswana. And so that...
You mean, when you say a filing scheme, you mean categorization of field material?
That's right, yes.
So that if you're writing up your notes, you
knew where to file them and that kind of thing, yes, yes.
and what headings to give the section, subsections.
That's right, yes, yes. And I think that we took the line that this was terribly dull, and it was important that it should be dull and uncontroversial,
Yes.
so that one would know where to look for the material.
Yes.
And that, as it were, our job was to try and then look at the material in a new light, but that it was important initially to file it non-controversially.
Yes. And non-controversially, how was that, in a sense, achieved?
Well, by taking the very pedestrian categories, which I think Shapira had used.
What can you give some examples of those? I mean,
Oh well, I mean, you have chiefs and commoners and so on, and so you have a section dealing with the chiefs' recruitment to the office, what their powers are, their relations with senior councillors, their relations with commoners, and so on. All in a kind of fairly systematic and mechanical way, and I think it was very useful.
And this was a kind of checklist for looking at political relationships and for phrasing your inquiry.
Yes.
And you were in Cape Town for 6 months.
About that, I think it was 5 months, perhaps. Yes.
And then went back to...
Then we went back, but then we went back, of course, to where we were going to carry out our own field work, so that Mitchell went to Nyasaland to study the Yao, and Marwick Marwick was financed rather differently, and I think directly from the Colonial Office and not through the Rhodes Livingston Institute, but was attached to Gluckman as one of his supervisors, And Marwick had a plan to do a comparative study of a matrilineal and a patrilineal people. The patrilineal group that he'd chosen was the Ngoni, that I was to study as a sort of major inquiry. And in fact, Marwick really set up a base camp among the Ngoni before I did, and then I more or less took over the camp that he had started to make.
Because he wanted to move to a matrilineal people.
Well, he discovered that he wanted to study. He wanted really to look at the Chewa rather than do a contrast between the Ngoni and the Chewa.
So that this in anthropological circles in this country, almost unique collaboration between more than one anthropologist that you had at
Yes,
Livingston.
yes.
Then, in a sense, finished because you all went off to your separate domains.
It didn't finish in as much as we kept in contact with one another. We managed to visit one another in the field to some extent, anyway. I was perhaps, I think, more fortunate than most in as much as I visited Gluckman himself in Barotse Land and Coulson among the Tonga, and I went to the Yao to see Clyde Mitchell with Elizabeth Coulson.
And all this was being financed out of Colonial and Development Welfare
That's
Funds,
right.
which were funding the Rosa Livingston
Yep.
Institute,
Yep.
and who were funding Elizabeth Coulson's research, Marwick's research.
Well,
that you say was
Marwick was
company.
being funded
Yeah,
directly, I think, from the
But,
Colonial Office.
but Gluckman's research
Yes.
and
Yep.
and the rest.
Yep.
But you were, although you were separated, I mean, were you using certain sort of common schedules?
Well, that's right, yes. We produced a few sort of blank forms, as it were, for doing census stuff, and these were common to the Institute as a whole. So that there was an emphasis on producing material which would be comparable. And Gluckman himself produced a paper which I think was never published, but it was quite an ambitious attempt to produce a kind of comparative survey of the whole of the matrilineal belt of Central Africa.
Based on?
Well, based partly on published material, but partly on the new stuff which we were collecting.
Yes. And then you went to the Ngoni, and you were there for some 20 months or so.
Well, I was there for a year in the first instance, and then we went to Oxford, and then I came back for another year. So I was there for about 22, nearly 24 months.
You all went
We all went to Oxford. Well, not Marwick, but Coulson, Mitchell and myself.
That was part of the contract, was it?
Well, the idea was that we would have 1 year in the field, and then 1 year writing up, and then another year in the field.
Yes.
We had contracts that lasted, I think, for 3.5 years, and then there was 6 months leave at the end, or something like that. We'd spent 6 months in the initial preparations in Mangalamba and in Cape Town. Then there was this year in the field, and so on. And the argument was to where should we spend the year in the middle of this preliminary writing up.
Yes.
And the original plan, at one stage there was a proposal that we should go to the railway line in northern Rhodesia, but there was really no suitable place there. So then the Colonial Office, or the Colonial Social Science Research Council, suggested that we should go to Cape Town. But by this time Gluckman was already his name had gone forward for a lectureship in Oxford, and so Gluckman was keen that we should go to Oxford with him. At one time it looked as though there was a deadlock between the two, and they suggested, Gluckman suggested as a compromise that we should go to St Helena, and in the face of this suggestion the Colonial SSRC gave way and allowed us all to go to Oxford.
And Gluckman had gone there by this time?
Yes, yes.
So you were all four of you there?
Yep.
And that was between, that was 47?
That was the academic year 47-48.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. And then you went back to...
Then I went back to the Ngoni for another year.
And and it was from there that you came to, you got a job in London.
Yes. While I was in Oxford, a job was advertised at UCL, a lectureship, and I applied for it and was offered it. And I said, well, I can only come in a year's time because I've still got a year's field work to do. And
Yes.
I discussed this with Darrell Ford, and he agreed that they would wait for a year.
I see. So you already had a...
I already had a job.
Yes. So when you went to Ngoni, was this sort of... I mean, the choice of going to Ngoni and studying what you did, was that dictated for you by outside bodies, or did it arise from your own interests?
No, I had no idea who they were at all, of course not. I hardly knew where Northern Rhodesia was. No, it arose out of a plan of research which Gluckman had drawn up, and which I think was very largely influenced by, partly by theoretical considerations like patrilineal, matrilineal, and things like that,
Yeah.
partly by what we would now call applied considerations. Let's say there was a resettlement scheme among the Ngoni, and he wanted to study the effects of that. Partly also by the fact that some of these areas had been studied, and he thought studied not well. And the Ngoni were selected partly because they had a resettlement scheme, but partly because Margaret Reed had written about the Ngoni, and I think that whoever was to go to the Ngoni was in effect to, as it were, check up on what Margaret Reed had written. Certainly that was... I had the impression that I was being drawn into, as it were, a quarrel among the senior generation.
Margaret Reed having worked with Malinowski and...
That's right, yes. So
and being on that side.
Yes. Mitchell went to the Yao. It was Rio Fortune was originally asked if he would study the Yao, but then Rio turned it down on the grounds that he'd studied some people called the Yao in China, and that he'd get them mixed up if he studied same named people in Nyasaland. So he never came. But, anyway.
And but this was a plan. I mean, in most areas,
yes,
after the war, there were these plans. I think first did one for West Africa.
That's right. And then there was one in Kenya, wasn't there, which Shapiro
did one for East Africa. And I think Edmund Leach did one for Sarawak.
Well, yes, that was a little later, I think, wasn't it?
I wasn't thinking of the research, I was thinking of a survey,
yes,
which was commissioned. You may be right, it
well,
was later.
There was a research plan for the Institute,
yes,
which I know was discussed at great length by the trustees and so on,
yes,
which Gluckman was the author of.
And then that presumably had gone to the colonial...
Yes, and they'd approved this idea of one person for
welfare,
the
yes.
Yao. And I think at one time I was to go to the Yao, but then because I was in London and Margaret Reed was in London and would have the opportunity of talking to her about the Ngoni, it was thought it would be better for me to go to the Ngoni. So I discussed what I was going to do with Margaret Reed before I went to Africa.
And the kind of things that she had done, I mean, did that influence the kind of things you did in any way, either negatively or positively?
I found what she'd written very helpful, of course, and it was she who put me on to the question of land ownership in the eastern province of Northern Rhodesia, which has a very complicated history, and it was, I think, through her prompting that I eventually ended up in the Public Record Office and started reading dispatches and things like that.
Before you went out there?
No, it was after I got back. But it was because she'd pointed out what a complicated history of land settlement there'd been in the Eastern Province, more so than in the rest of Northern Rhodesia.
What year was that you were looking in the Public Record Office?
Well, I was working in the Public Record Office when I was at UCL
yes.
in 49-50.
Yes. But of course you could only get the records presumably up till 99 in that, what?
1902 was
1902.
Yes. But the Ngoni were conquered in 1898.
I see.
So
Yes.
that all the interesting stuff was there. once they were conquered, they ceased to be interesting, of course, and there was nothing. They were just a tribe.
Yes. I know. I was just thinking that the amount of time, the span of records that you could get to at that time was extremely narrow.
Well, it was narrow, but on the other hand, I think that there wouldn't really have been very much to discover after 1902 until much more recently. The Northern Rhodesia was in that period controlled not directly by the Colonial Office but by the British South Africa Company, whose records conveniently had all been destroyed during the war. I think that they weren't a particularly literate administration, and I doubt if there was very much to discover.
Yes.
At one stage, there was 1 year for which all the published information available on the whole of Northern Rhodesia was the one sentence: the conduct of the natives has continued to be satisfactory.
So you were the actual problems that you dealt with when you got to when you worked among the Ngoni, they arose partly from your reading of and suggestions by Margaret Reed, partly
Yes.
from you having worked with Gluckman.
Mm-hmm.
They would be the main influences.
I suppose so, but I'm sure I'd read other things as well. I mean, the first paper that I published was on genealogies. This is a paper that I wrote in this sort of seminar that we had in Cape Town. And I don't think that it was Gluckman who put me onto that, certainly not, Margaret Reed perhaps, I doubt it though. I think I got onto that through reading Rivers. As an undergraduate I had dined every evening under and beneath the portrait of Rivers, with which you're sure you're very familiar.
Was that in the hall at that
Yes,
time?
it was in the hall then. Rivers
Yes.
in army uniform
Yes.
in the First World War.
It was then taken away, and I've never been able to lay my hands on it.
Well,
I had always wanted it in my room.
I see.
As it is, I've only got Palmer.
Well, I think you should try and get Rivers back.
Yes, well, I think that so you dined under Rivers' portrait
That's right,
there.
yes.
So
For 7 years at school, I walked past the tablet commemorating Henry Sumner, Maine, so that I had some sort of connection there too.
Yes. But at that time, he didn't. So the name of Henry Sumner, Maine didn't perhaps mean a hell of a lot to you.
No, not then. No. But I discovered him later on.
Yes. But you had, I mean, your interest in genealogies,
Mm-hmm.
and to some extent your interest in more systematic modes of inquiry,
Mm-hmm.
then derived partly from Rivers too.
Yes.
Since,
Yes.
he was probably one of the more
Systematic people.
systematic
I agree.
of the
Yes,
earlier
sure. Yeah.
earlier anthropologists.
Yes.
Not much from Max Gluckman. He
Well,
was, he
Max
was
was-
not terribly systematic.
No,
That's a
but Max was full of
question.
ideas, and
Yes.
one had to sift through them. But I found him a very stimulating person to work with. But one had to then convert his enthusiasm into something, as it were, that would sort of stand tests of falsifiability.
Yes. I mean, he was studying he was working on the Barotse. He had already worked among the Zulu, of course,
Yes,
before
yes,
that.
yes.
So he was in a sense familiar with some of the ethnographic, not to say the contemporary political background of that you were dealing with.
Well, I mean, he was, I suppose, familiar with the southern Bantu origins of the
Yes.
Ngoni, but they were pretty attenuated among
Yes.
the group that I worked with, much more so among the people I studied than with the people in the northern part of Nyasaland, where Margaret Reed had spent some of her time. So that the only Swazi or Zulu, as it were, words that any of the people I studied could remember were a few sort of drunken snatches of songs and that kind of thing. And they would really only talk old Ngoni, as it was called, when they were drunk, and it didn't make sense. And I certainly never tried to learn it.
So what were they talking the rest of the time?
Well, they talked Chinsenga. It was a language, a Central African language, which had become a kind of lingua franca of the people that they'd captured on their way north. So that they didn't represent anything like a northern branch of the Zulu or northern branch of the Swazi even.
And all this has happened since fairly late on in the... I mean, this was the second half of the 19th century.
Well, they left the Northern Transvaal at the end of the 1820s,
Yes.
and then went up as far as Victoria Nyanza, and then came back again and settled where they were when I found them, as it were. They settled there in about 1880, and had been there ever since.
Yes, so they'd been there for 70 years or so when you were working. When you were working there.
That's right. Yes.
And so they were a fairly urbanized community that you were working
urbanized, not well. They were urbanized in the sense that the great majority of men had spent a lot of time working on mines in southern Rhodesia, or to a lesser extent on the Copperbelt. Some had even been down to the Rand in South Africa, or even to Tanganyika and the goldfields. But there was just a little dorp, a township of Fort Jameson in the Ngoni area that I studied. It was entirely rural there. And of course, not all the women had been away to the mines.
But some of them had.
Well, a few had been to the Copperbelt, yes.
But so the Gluckman's suggestions were not really based on what work he had been doing earlier and what work he was doing
I think
among the Barotse.
Well, the suggestions that he made that I found valuable in a sense, I suppose, were those essentially derived from his study of a sort of group conflict among the Zulu, much more so than at that level of generality, rather than anything sort of specifically ethnographic to the Zulu as such.
Yes.
And I think that also his view of Northern Rhodesia as a whole was probably rather highly coloured by the fact that he worked in Barotse land, where legal institutions were much more elaborate than anywhere in the rest of Northern Rhodesia. And I think he was perhaps disappointed that we couldn't produce from our areas anything comparable to the material that he'd produced from Barotse land on law.
I mean, this is presumably because Barotse land was still a much more ongoing state system.
That's right, yes, they hadn't really been conquered properly.
And had been left to continue.
Well, I think that partly, but also it was because the Ngoni were essentially migrant band of robbers, as it were.
Yes.
And their legal institutions were probably never very elaborate.
No.
Pretty rough and ready.
They were sort of freebooters. That's
right, yes.
And how did you find them? I mean, were they still freebooting when you were there?
Well, they liked to think of themselves as such. They, for instance, there was an expression I seem to remember culling from an essay that was written in a competition I organised among school children, contrasting the Chewa and the Ngoni, saying that the Chewa are just like slaves, they spend all their time eating, whereas the Ngoni are like the Europeans, they spend all their time drinking. And there was this sort of notion that they were rather superior. And then again, the notion that the English must in fact have come directly from heaven, because only such a powerful people would have been able to conquer the Ngoni, whereas they of course had conquered everybody else around them.
Yes.
So they thought of themselves very much as an elite in Central Africa.
Yes. And they used to spend most of their time drinking, did they?
Well, they didn't spend most of the time drinking because sometimes the grog ran out.
Yes.
But it often was rather difficult at the weekends to find a sober informant.
But this was because they had been down the mines, or what? I mean, they got used to drinking down in
No, I think they... No, I think the effect of the mines was an unfortunate one, in that they introduced from the mines a number of sort of quick recipes which produced a rather inferior brew.
This was milled beer, was it?
Yes. Whereas the real stuff, which took a week or so to brew, was really very pleasant to drink.
Yes. But it was quite strong. I mean, it was,
Oh, it was
sort
quite
of
strong.
inebriating, was
Oh,
it?
good
Yeah.
heavens, yes.
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 But it was quite elaborate, and there were it was a very, the beginnings of parties were always very formal and
Yes.
that sort of thing, and you offered it to people, and there were these precautions against being poisoned and so on.
When you came back from the Ngoni, you went to University College
Yes.
and worked with Darrell Ford. How did you
Yes.
find that? You were working with Cavery and Ford. What
Well,
else
yes.
was there?
Well, and Barnicott, that was the total
Ah,
staff.
yes, four of you.
Four of us. Hmm.
Yes.
Well, I enjoyed myself there, yes. I wasn't allowed to lecture on the Ngoni. I had to lecture on kinship and East Africa generally and all sorts of things, so that I had to broaden my range of expertise pretty rapidly. And but I managed to cope, and I enjoyed it, yes. I was there for 2 years.
You were there between 49 and
49,
51.
51, yes.
Why did you give that up?
Because I was offered a Simon Fellowship in Manchester
Yes.
by Gluckman, who wanted, I think, to start sociology as he saw it in Manchester, and thought that I should carry out some kind of field research which would qualify as sociology. I think that was one of the reasons why he wanted me to go there.
He wanted you to go to do this. What research do you want you to do? I mean,
Well, he didn't specify what I should do,
Yes.
but I think that he hoped that I would choose something that would look more sociological than
Yes.
what I'd done in Central Africa.
But the Simon Research Fellowship was just for 1 year.
No.
Ah.
I held it. It was for 1 year in the first instance, but it was renewable for another year, and I think rather exceptionally, it was renewed for a third year in my case, because I didn't have a job at the end of the second year.
But you were, at the same time, you were a research fellow at St. John's College.
That's right. Yes, I was. Yes.
You don't count that as a job.
Well, I mean, it paid £200 a year or something like that. It wasn't enough to live on, no.
I see. What did the other research fellows do?
I don't know at all what they did. I suppose perhaps they lived in college. I don't know. Maybe.
Yes, I see what you mean.
I know that I was thought to be the only research fellow actually doing research at that time. I mean, I was actually going away to do research.
You mean the rest of them,
The rest of them, I think,
living in St. John's?
Yes.
Working
yes.
in the labs or
That's
something?
right, that kind of thing, yes.
Yes. So you were you used
And
to
I had a wife and 3 children to support.
Yes.
I wouldn't have been able, in the best of circumstances, to be able to live on a junior research fellowship. I doubt it.
No, I can see that. But you used to come down to St. John's occasionally.
Once a week to
Did you?
supervise. Hmm.
You were supervising in Cambridge right through that time, were you?
Well, when I was not in, I was in Norway for most of the time when I held my research fellowship. I was actually doing research.
Yes.
But when I came back to UCL, then I did. I think perhaps I'm not quite sure just when it was, but I certainly used to come up to John's for 1 night a week, and I used to sleep in Hollick's rooms, I remember. And I supervised people like Salisbury, Browswell, and people like that.
Oh yes. So that your move to work in Bremnes, was that part of Max Gluckman's conspiracy to make him more sociological?
Well, I suppose it, and that's how it might be seen. Yes, when I got my Simon Fellowship, then I had to decide where to go.
Yes.
I had felt rather claustrophobic being 1,000 miles from the sea in the middle of Africa, and I
Yes.
thought it'd be nice to have somewhere more maritime.
Yes.
The Ngoni were largely Calvinists or lapsed Catholics, and I thought I'd try another religion. So
Yes.
that the fact that these Norwegians were Lutherans was an attraction.
Yes.
I had been interned in Norway at the beginning of the war, so I had some Norwegian connections.
You've been interned there.
Well, Yes, I mean under rather generous circumstances in a winter sports hotel for a month, at the expense of the HM government.
Yes.
But I'd been working in a work camp in Norway just before the war started, and on the day the war started, I was in a Norwegian ship going back to England, which turned around and went back to Norway. So we had to wait for a month.
Yes. I see. So that had, but you weren't interned in Bremnes or anywhere near there.
No. I'd never been to Bremnes.
Yes.
No.
And what made you choose Bremnes?
Well, I wanted to choose a place where there were fishing, because I wanted to study something maritime. I wanted to disprove what had been said about the fishers of Fife by Patterson and Watson and co., who had said that fishing boats were inherited matrilineally. It seemed to be nonsense. So I wanted to look at the inheritance of fishing vessels, which I saw as an analogue of cattle, that's to say, of valuable property that was movable, as distinct from land, which is immovable. So I thought that vessels would be the kind of maritime analogue of cattle in that sense.
Yes.
I wanted to study fishermen whose vessels were small enough so that they only went away for a short time and therefore weren't isolated from social life ashore.
Yes.
Let's say I didn't want to go and study whalers who spend all their time in the South Atlantic and really didn't have an impact on local society. And I consulted a friend of mine, a Norwegian friend of mine, who was working in Oslo at the time, as to the right sort of place to go. He advised me to go to Bremnes. It so happened that in his office there was a woman who had been born in Bremnes and who was still in contact with people there. And she arranged for a relative of hers to look after me. I went to live in his house.
But although you're interested in boats as movable property, in fact your first published work was on land and immovable property.
That's right. When I got there I found that it was a completely non-starter. All the vessels, all the fishing boats that had been in use at the beginning of the war had either been sunk by the British or requisitioned by the Germans. So it was a non-problem. There was no inheritance at all, no possibility of inheritance.
There were no boats?
Well, they'd got new boats.
Yes, I see.
And none of them had been inherited yet, and none of them likely to be inherited. In fact, a lot of them were sunk in order to qualify for a subsidy.
Yes. So you moved away from the sea, inland?
No, I studied fishing, all right.
Yes.
But it did so happen that I had this information on land rights. One of the entrenched clauses in the Norwegian constitution is concerned with the transmission of rights in land, so-called odelsrett, and this seemed a fairly obvious place to start.
And the work on fishing, that you also got a lot of material on that as well?
Well, I've got quite a bit, yes. Not as much as I would like, but I did. I mean, I have in my article on class and committees, I do talk about fishing and the contrast, and I discuss this with Redfield, the contrast between the ethics of fishing and the ethics of agriculture.
Yes.
Remember that I said that fishing is a kind of warfare.
Yes.
It's hunting.
Yes. And you were in Bremnes for over a year?
Well, in the first instance, we were there for, more than a year. We had 2 winters, so I had 2 winters there.
Yes.
For about sort of 18 months. 15 months, I suppose. 16 months.
Yes. And you were there
when
with
I
a
went
family?
back, well, my family came later on, yes. They joined me after I'd been there for about 6 months.
Yes. And they went to school there?
No. Our eldest child was less than 7, which was the age at which they started school in those days.
Yes.
So he didn't go to school.
Yes. And then you went back to University College when you finished in Bremnes, did you?
No, my job at University College had come to an end when I'd become an honorary research assistant instead at University College. No, I went back to Manchester to write up my material and started to apply for jobs. And I applied for a lectureship in the University of Cambridge, but I was unsuccessful.
Oh, well, who got
yes.
that instead?
Edmund. So I then got his readership in London.
I see. Oh, yes, yes. And that was in 1954.
That was, I went to LSE in January 1954, that's right.
Yes. I see. So that was, of course, that was Edmund's
job.
Readership
Yeah,
that you got
yeah,
there, yes.
yeah.
Yes. And you were at, you stayed at University College for what, 2 years?
Well, at LSE, you mean?
Yeah, at LSE.
Well, 2 years and a term, I think it was.
Yes.
That's right, 2 years and a term, because I left at the end of the Lent term 56
Yes.
to go to Australia.
And that were you were working with Firth and Shapiro again at that time?
That's right, yes. Shapiro I think Shapiro came perhaps a little after I did, I'm not quite sure, but...
he came about that time.
About that time, yes.
Yes.
Because I remember talking to Raymond about Shapiro coming, but we were walking along KP at the time, and I'm not quite sure when it was.
And you had mostly when you were at LSE, you were teaching and.
I was teaching, yes.
Heavily,
yes.
yes.
Yes, yes, I was really pretty busy.
Yes. So you didn't get much time to do any writing or anything at that period.
Well, not as much as I would have liked. No. Pity, really, but I was really pretty busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And your next job was in Australia.
That's right.
And you took over the chair which Firth had earlier held and Radcliffe Brown at Sydney.
Well, Firth was never really the professor. He was only an acting head of the department. He was only acting professor.
Ah.
Radcliffe Brown was the first holder of the chair.
Yes.
And then there was this interim period when Firth was sort of acting, but Elkin was the
I see. Firth was never. I didn't realise that. I thought that Firth took over the chair. Yes.
No, not really.
Mm.
I think he was only acting head of the department.
Yes.
And then he went off to LSE to
Yes.
lectureship.
Yes. What prompted you to leave a nice berth that you had in?
Well, there were a number of reasons, I suppose. It seemed to me that most of my colleagues in England, who were senior to me, were healthy and not all that old, and that it would be a long time before any senior posts became vacant in England.
Yes.
I had 4 children by this time, so I was anxious to earn enough to look after them. I found working at LSE not all that congenial, I suppose, in as much as I could never really empathise with Firth. And I think the precipitating cause was that Firth had submitted a manuscript to the LSE monograph series,
Yes.
which I thought was so terribly badly written that it was unfair to his co-author to publish it. And so I took rather a stern line about that. So I thought it would be better if I left.
And Sydney was the only prospect that you saw of leaving for at that time, was it?
Well, that was the only chair available, yes. It didn't seem to me that there was unlikely to be any chairs in Britain for a considerable time.
I mean, were you trying to get back to the Pacific?
No, I don't think so, no. I don't think that was a reason.
But you did start some work, I suppose, inevitably, out there, because you got involved in New Guinea.
Well, I got involved through my students in New Guinea, and also I got involved with Aboriginal Australia, again, through my students.
Yes.
But I didn't, in fact, ever do any field work, and I never collected any systematic data in anywhere when I was in Australia. Had I stayed on and not come to Cambridge, then I would have, in fact, gone to New Guinea. I had a plan lined up to study a place, well, it would be in the West Sepik, north of Telefomin, that sort of area.
Oh, yes. What were you going to look at there?
Oh, well, I wanted to look at a society which had, I forget the details now, but I think I was really concerned with sort of patterns of authority and things like that in a society that lacked organized chieftainship, but on the other hand also didn't have this pattern of organized competitive big men leadership that you find in the Highlands.
Yes.
And I'd visited a number of areas on the Highland fringe on the northern side, and it seemed to be a very pleasant sort of area to work in.
And your work on the Moongin that you published later on, I mean, that really rose out of your reading of Australia.
That's right, and I had in fact visited the Moongin, but or at least one of the bits where the Moongin might be, because I'd supervised Les Hyatt's work in Arnhem Land, so I had actually been there. But it was essentially an intellectual problem.
Well, find it very different teaching. I mean, you've just come from the LSE, which was the epicenter of anthropology in the 1930s, if not in the early 1950s. And apart from getting away from Sir Raymond and earning more money to keep your numerous family, were there any other benefits or costs?
Well, there were certainly costs, yes. I remember feeling very dejected at the low expectations of academic attainment that I found.
At the undergraduate level or the graduate
well,
level?
I think at the level of the staff as well.
Really?
I remember writing to Gluckman saying that I'd got this job in Sydney and nobody was going to take the slightest interest in anything I did, and I could sit here for the next 25 years and not write a single paper, and no one there would complain.
You felt that?
Yep. And I remember saying that I was thinking of applying for some deputy assistant doorkeeper's job in SOAS, which is the worst I could think of.
Well, yes, at that time.
At that time, of course.
It's raised its level since then, but really,
yes.
I mean, that's
so I thought it was a
harsh words, really.
Yes.
Considering that, I mean, Ratcliffe Brown must have had some joy there. I mean, he did a certain amount. I mean, he encouraged a certain amount of research to go on.
Oh, that's right. Yes. He had quite a lot of money to encourage research with, whereas I had nothing. I arrived in Australia at a time when
penniless.
Well, when the universities were at their lowest ebb. Universities then were funded solely by states, not by the Commonwealth. And it was only while I was there in Sydney that the Murray Commission recommended that the Commonwealth Government should interest itself in the financing of universities, and as a result of that the Australian University Grants Commission, whatever it was set up, and things started to improve.
Why?
I had smaller staff than Elkin had before me, in fact.
I mean, why did it decrease? Why did Ratcliffe Brown have more money than you did?
Ratcliffe Brown got a lot of money from Rockefeller, and all the research which he promoted was financed from American sources, not from Australian sources. And then, unfortunately, the treasurer of the fund embezzled it all, and as you know, a lot of Australian researchers suddenly found themselves penniless, like Penniman and Stanner and so on.
The
treasurer of the fund in Sydney, who was a professor
of the Rockefeller Fund?
No, of the treasurer of the body which was administering the money in Australia.
Was that the Australian National Research Council?
Well, it was a subcommittee of that, I think. Yes.
Which Ratcliffe Brown was the secretary, and then Firth was.
No.
Ah.
No, Ratcliffe Brown, I think, was never a member of the National Research Council at all, in fact, and there was some ill feeling about that. But certainly the funds were misappropriated.
But Ratcliffe Brown had, in a sense, attracted the funds to Sydney.
That's a story. Yes, I've never gone into that, but certainly that's the official version of what happened.
Well, I was.
Yep.
I mean, in a sense, in the same way that Malinowski attracted the same funds to
Yes, yes,
LSE,
Yes.
and the International African Institute. But then, what happened to Elkin? How did he get the money? There was still Rockefeller money going on.
Yes, I mean, after all,
This was Laura Spellman.
I think so, probably. Yes,
Rockefeller Foundation,
yes.
run by that extraordinary man Rummel,
Well, who offered the money to Cambridge for a chair of sociology.
who didn't give. Yes, I was coming back to that.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Well, he offered the money for political science and
Sure.
sociology,
Yeah.
and got
Got the one, not the other.
results.
Yeah.
Martin Boomer writes about it.
That's right.
Yes. Well, I think that it's
Well, that may be
probable,
the same
though I'm
time,
not
yes.
absolutely
Yeah.
clear, that the Sydney money also came
Came
from
the same
Ross
sort.
Spellman, and it also came from Rummel, who had been a pupil who had been trained at Chicago in the days of Albion Small. And,
I see.
company,
Yes.
and who transformed this foundation. And it funded. They were very interested in empirical research. And I think that was probably why.
I
they
see.
did that.
Yes.
But then they went on. But what about, it must have continued under Elkin. When did Elkin take over?
Well, Elkin took over. Radcliffe Brown left in 1931,
Yes.
and Elkin must have taken over in about 1933, I think.
Yes.
And I think most of them were on 5-year grants or something like that. So that,
But you got nothing. I mean, when you came, there was no money at all.
well, there was virtually no money for research
They
at
put it
all.
all into Canberra.
Well, Canberra was the Australian National University, but that was funded by the Commonwealth government, whereas New South Wales, the government of New South Wales was responsible for funding
Yes, but
Sydney.
some of the research at Sydney was funded by Commonwealth.
No,
funds.
not then. I think not.
Oh.
Well, there was nothing available to me anyway. All we had was, I think, one studentship, which had been founded by a man called Strong, who had been a medical officer in Papua. But that was all. So there wasn't much of a scope for a research program.
So who did you have there as students? Les Hyatt?
Les Hyatt was, and Michael Allen, and Frank Jones.
Michael Allen had migrated from Ireland to come to Sydney.
Well, via Nepal and Western Australia, yes.
Yes. What about Meggitt?
Meggitt was already in the field in New Guinea when I first arrived, and then he was appointed to a lectureship. That was my first appointment that I made. But he was already in New Guinea by that time.
But I mean, with Meggitt, Hyatt, Allen, you had a lively intellectual circle.
Well, they were just Hyatt was just finishing his undergraduate work, and then went on to Canberra, where they could offer him a research studentship, which I couldn't have done in Sydney.
Yes.
And Michael Allen was doing a qualifying exam for an MA, and I persuaded him to abandon his candidature for the MA in Sydney and also go to Canberra, where there was more money, and where I was going anyway by that time.
Oh, you were going by then. When did you get...
Well, I was in Sydney for two years and a little bit, about a week or so.
But you mean halfway through that period you were appointed to
the chair
the
in
Australian National University?
Yes.
And took over from Nardell.
Well, there was a interregnum of over 2 years, I suppose.
There was there?
Mm-hmm.
While they were searching.
Yes, because Edmund, for instance, arrived in Sydney 3 or 4 months after I'd arrived, on his way to Canberra. And they were trying to persuade him to take the chair in Sydney, in Australia, in Canberra.
That would have been...
In 1956, that would have been.
1956, when he had been a lecturer in Cambridge for 2 years.
Yep.
And was feeling the strain.
Well, I think he was also offered sort of a field trip in Sri Lanka on the way.
Oh, yes.
So that no doubt he was interested.
Offered by?
By the ANU.
Was it?
Oh, yes.
You mean they paid for his work in Sri Lanka?
apparently, or enabled him to go there anyway. I mean, he could stop off on the way to Australia. I don't know the details, but I remember him mentioning this as being one of the attractions of visiting Australia, quite apart from looking over the possibility of accepting the chair.
Yes. And then, so it was after a year or two that you were appointed?
Well, yes, after 18 months or so, I suppose. For about 6 months, I suppose, or so, I ran both departments.
Nardell's post was a post in anthropology and sociology.
Well, the department was a department of anthropology and sociology, but as I say, his chair was in anthropology. The name of the chair.
And your chair was in anthropology too?
That was yes, that's right.
But you were head of the department
of anthropology and sociology, yes.
Yes.
But it was a department in the School of Pacific Studies, so the sociology that we did had to be Pacific rather than Australian, as it were. There was a division of labour between the two. There were 4 research schools in the original plan of the Australian National University: medicine, physics, social sciences, and so-called Pacific Studies. And these were designed to attract back the 4 eminent Australians or New Zealanders to the ANU. And Firth was to be the first director of the School of Pacific Studies, and Hancock the first director of the School of Social Sciences. And the division between these 2 schools of social sciences, as they were, was always a bit obscure. But the notion was that the School of Pacific Studies would be more heavily engaged in field work, and at least for the most part would be engaged in field work outside Australia.
I see. So the Pacific began where the social sciences left off.
Well, that was its sort of internal boundary, and the external boundary was subject to negotiation. I had some difficulty in persuading my colleagues that a field study just north of the Hindu Kush, north of the Salang Pass in Afghanistan, was part of the Pacific, but I managed to do so in the end.
What about the Australian Aborigines?
Well, they were again considered part of the Pacific rather than Australia.
They were. So there was a black-white
That's
divide.
Right. Sure. Yep.
So Pacific Studies was kind of browns and blacks.
That's right, mainly. Yep.
And the director of that was...
well, there was no director when I first went there. Davidson was only dean. The first director was John Crawford, who was an economist.
Mm-hmm. And there you were teaching only graduate students, and you had money.
That's right, yes.
So you were quids in.
That's right, sure.
And so that you had a lot of people coming there, going to the field.
Yes. Our budget was made up of about 50% on salaries and 50% on research expenses.
Working largely in New Guinea?
Well, not only in New Guinea, but we did, I suppose, that was the largest concentration, but it was also a department which had archaeology and linguistics in it. And in purely geographical terms, we ranged from the northern part of Afghanistan to, I suppose, Tahiti.
Yes. But it was mostly research, so your teaching was limited.
Well, there was no lecturing. We had research fellows and we had research students, but there were no
gave courses.
There were no undergraduates. No. Well, the only courses we gave were things like mapping and things like that. But no.
You didn't give courses in anthropology.
No, it was assumed that people who coming to us would have already got MAs or BAs at least, good BAs in social anthropology before they began.
So it was just seminars of people.
Yeah. Because I remember a man arriving straight from Harvard saying that in the few months that he had before he went off into the field, he wanted to bone up on kinship, as he called it.
Yes.
I expressed some surprise at this, and he said, oh yes, so he'd never been to any lectures on kinship in Harvard because, I don't know, he'd always been away or the courses had not been given and so on.
But you didn't give him any there?
I didn't arrange a course of lectures just for this one chap, no.
No. So that you were, I mean, that was a very privileged situation, really.
Well, it was privileged for those, for the research students and the research fellows. It wasn't particularly privileged for me, running this vast show. There were about 70. I once made a tally of the number of people who, if they wanted to commit suicide, would probably come and cry on my shoulder first. And there were over 70 people in this category. Luckily, they didn't all want to commit suicide at the same time.
You mean they were...
But some of them did.
They were research students.
Well, they were members of staff and secretaries and so on.
Yes,
the whole
yes,
shooting
yes.
match.
But you were... you stuck that for 11 years.
11 years, that's right.
Yes. And then leapt from the frying pan.
Into the fire, that's right.
Yes. What made you come back to Cambridge?
Well, you may remember that you sent me a copy of the advertisement.
I think probably this is a stage when I need another glass of sherry, but yes, I do sort of remember that, yes, I do, yes. Well, leaving aside these personal...
On the contrary, how could we leave them aside?
Yes. But you were very committed to Australia by then, whatever your...
Well, I was committed to... I still am committed to Australia, there's no doubt about that. But I thought that I'd been there 11 years, that if I didn't move then, I probably would be stuck forever until I retired. That after 25 years I would not only would I find Canberra rather boring, but also I would become rather boring to other people, and that 11 years was quite long enough in the one job.
Yes. I suppose I'm supposed to ask you how you found Cambridge. That
Well,
would take us to another
tape.
10 reels.
It would, yes. All I can say is that if I'd known what it was going to be like, I wouldn't have come.
Well, I imagine that's the point on which we will finish, because, you would have stayed.
But I don't know that I would have stayed, but I don't think I would have come here. I might. There was some suggestion at one time that I should switch to sociology in ANU.
You mean in the college?
In the institute.
Yes, but that wouldn't have been any better, because you would have still been in an administrative position.
Well, that's right.
You've been in administrative positions.
Yes.
Since you made the break to Australia in 1956.
That's right, yes.
And you would have been going to another one, would you?
I would have been, yes.
Which would have had the same disadvantages as the anthropology.
Yes, it would have. Well, but it would have been a fresh group and a fresh set of problems and so on, and different. It would have been in the other research school, and so on.
Yes. And there weren't research chairs that you could have gone to, as distinct from administrative chairs.
Well, I didn't know of any. No, I would have looked rather keenly at any that I had seen.
I mean, it seems a great pity that, unlike, say, departments of economics, where you've got one person ministering in about 5 other chairs, or
yes,
or physics or whatever, that in the other social sciences, the professor tends to be in the department, so there are very few research chairs
that's
to
right.
go to. Were there none in Australia?
No, not really, no. We managed to get 2 chairs in my own department. Stana had one in the end, but that was, at that time, I think the only, well, perhaps there was one in philosophy, but otherwise all departments had only one professor, and the professor was head of the department.
And Stana, of course, is working in the Institute of Aboriginal Studies a great deal.
Well, he wasn't actually at that time. No, that's a rather another rather complicated story as to his relations with Institute of Aboriginal Studies. I mean, he was, I think, understandably reluctant to assume too much of administrative responsibilities when I was still there, as it were.
But if you hadn't, I mean, you wanted to leave Canberra after having done 11 years and not wanting sort of...
the other reason why I think I wanted to, why I was attracted to Cambridge was that you had told me that in Cambridge, unlike a provincial university, professors tended not to be head of departments, and that it was all done by the secretary of the faculty board. So I was attracted by this proposal.
That was true in economics, of course.
Yes.
That was true in economics, where it was done in that way.
Yes, yes, yes.
And since at that time you were joining economics...
That's right.
I maybe extrapolated from that particular model.
I see, yes. Well, the details of the extrapolation, unfortunately, weren't explained to me.
Well, Maya must have been, I mean, I wasn't the only consultant that you...
oh, no.
You must have
I was
more objective opinion.
I was brought up to always ask three informants, and if they say that...
You asked Maya, too?
Yes, I'm not so sure about Meyer, whether I asked him.
Edmund?
No, I don't think so, no. No, there were other reasons. I mean, my daughter was over here in England, and to some extent I had applied for the job only in the hope that I would be interviewed, so that I could get my fare paid to see her.
Yes.
And then I was trapped, of course, because I was offered the job.
Yes.
So that I was... what happened was that I thought that she was becoming a hippie, and that I was neglecting my parental responsibilities.
Yes.
But I ought to try and see her, therefore, and I accepted an invitation to contribute to a Festschrift for Levi-Strauss, which was to be, unlike other Festschrifts...
Time of the Arrow.
Well, that was my contribution, yes, yes. But it was to be a seminar was to be held in New York, at which Levi-Strauss would discuss with the contributors what they had written about him or in honor of him.
Yes.
Operation Gift Horse, as I called it. Mm-hmm. And when that fell through, I was a bit stuck and wanted still to see my daughter. And so I had to apply for this job in the hope that they would interview me.
Well, as you know, I also applied for the job.
That's right.
And had you turned it down, there was not much chance that I would get it, but we might both have been in a different situation.
That's right.
And you would have gone back to Canberra.
Yes.
And served out your time.
Well, or else I would have thought of something else.
Yes.
Some other ploy.
Yes. But you really wanted something which wasn't on the administrative side.
Well, that was what I was hoping for, yes, yes. And of course that's what I got, but what I got was a job with entirely political responsibilities, not administrative ones. If I'd had administrative responsibilities, then I could have resigned from them in protest. But as it was, I was stuck with these political responsibilities, which I couldn't sort of slough off in this way.
So you could have retired, as others have done, to Churchill.
I could have done, but that would have been...
As others have retired to All Souls.